Hi, I'm Arabella. 2 weeks ago, I walked into my brother's promotion party with a gift and a fake smile, and walked out with blood in my mouth, my hair ripped from my scalp, and my dignity trampled in front of 68 people. My dad hit me. My mom laughed. My brother clapped and said, "You had it coming." And not one person stopped them. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? It wasn't just one night. It was years of quiet theft, manipulation, and betrayal that all came crashing down in that ballroom. So, what do you think happened after I made one phone call that night? Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. I read every one. I don't even know why I came. That thought kept looping in my mind as I stood near the ballroom's side wall, clutching my purse like it could shield me. The room was all marble floors and chandeliers, the kind of place my parents loved, the kind of place I never belonged. 68 people dressed to the nines, all here for my brother's big night. My older brother, the decorated hero, the golden child, and me, I was just Arabella. The daughter they rarely mentioned, the sister they pretended didn't exist until it was convenient to make me the punchline. I told myself I came because it was the right thing to do, because you show up for family even when they don't show up for you. That's what I told myself as I hovered by the back, watching my mother flit from guest to guest like she owned the place, her pearls catching the light as easily as her fake smile did. My father was by the bar, already holding court with a few of my brother's military buddies. And there he was, my brother, basking in it all, letting everyone fawn over him like he hadn't been cutting me down since I was old enough to speak. "Arabella," a woman I barely knew said as she walked past, her tone polite but strained. "It's nice that you came. Nice that I came." Like this was charity work on my part. I forced a smile and nodded. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied. My mother spotted me then, her smile thinning just enough for me to see the truth. She walked over, heels clicking like tiny hammers on the polished floor. "You didn't need to come if you had nothing nice to say," she murmured, loud enough for a nearby couple to hear. They glanced at me with that look, pity mixed with entertainment. "I didn't realize existing counted as commentary," I said softly, and her eyes narrowed. Before I could retreat, my brother appeared, drink in hand, his medals shining like his ego. "Oh, Arabella," he said, his voice too loud, too casual. "I almost forgot you do. Whatever it is you do, graphic design? That's cute. I guess not everyone can serve their country." He smiled, sipping his drink like his words weren't designed to sting. Something inside me snapped. "At least what I do doesn't come with a built-in fan club," I said, just as lightly, even though my hands were trembling. The smirk on his face faded for a second, but before I could savor it, a shadow loomed over us. My father. His jaw was tight, his eyes already bloodshot. "What did you just say?" His voice was low, dangerous, the kind that makes your stomach drop. I opened my mouth to answer, but I didn't get the chance. He moved faster than I thought a man his age could. The crack of his fist connecting with my face was louder than the string quartet. The music stopped. Conversations stopped. My world stopped. Pain exploded through my jaw, and for a moment I couldn't even process what had happened. Then his hand was in my hair, yanking me backward. I gasped, my scalp screaming as he dragged me toward the exit like I was trash to be taken out. I heard the collective inhale of the crowd, the hush of scandal, but no one moved. Not one of those 68 people stepped in. And then, through the ringing in my ears, I heard it. My mother's laugh. A sharp, delighted sound, like this was the best entertainment she'd had in years. My brother clapped. "You had it coming," he said, and I think that cut deeper than my father's fist. The hallway outside was colder, quieter, but it didn't feel safer. He let go of me just outside the doors, and I stumbled, catching myself against the wall. My lip was split, blood dripping onto my dress. My scalp ached where his fingers had been. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I walked. No, I ran to the parking lot, every step heavier than the last. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the keys out of my purse. I sat in the driver's seat, slamming the door shut like it could keep out the sound of my mother's laugh, my brother's words, the silence of all those people who watched and did nothing. In the rearview mirror, a stranger stared back at me. Her lip was swollen, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes red with tears she didn't remember crying. I wiped the blood from my chin with the back of my hand and whispered to myself, "This isn't just another night. This was war." I reached for my phone, fingers trembling, and stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I gripped it tight, took a breath, and said, "It's time." I drove home on autopilot, my hands clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white. The hum of the tires on the highway was the only sound in my little car, but inside my head it was chaos, replaying every second, every look, every word. My mother's laugh, my brother's smirk, my father's hand across my face. It all swirled like a storm I couldn't escape. By the time I parked outside my apartment, the adrenaline had worn off enough for the pain to set in. My jaw throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I climbed the narrow stairs to my unit, each step heavier than the last, and when I finally pushed open my door, the silence of the place nearly broke me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I locked the door, leaned against it, and just breathed. Slow, shaky, deliberate breaths. The bathroom light was unkind. I stood there in front of the mirror, taking in the stranger staring back at me. My lip was swollen, the left side of my face already bruising purple, and my hair was a tangled mess where his fingers had yanked it. My dress, the one I saved up for because I wanted to at least look like I belonged tonight, was torn at the shoulder. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was like my body had decided I'd already given them enough. I grabbed my phone and with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, took photo after photo. My face, my dress, my arms. Evidence. I kept thinking that word. Evidence. This wasn't just a bad night. This wasn't just another bruise I'd cover up and pretend didn't exist. I couldn't let them bury me in silence again. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I stared at my contacts list, scrolling past names I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I saw hers. Dana. Back in law school, she'd been brilliant but broke. One bad semester away from losing everything. I'd helped her when no one else would. I remembered slipping her my old textbooks, buying her meals, even covering part of her rent once. "You saved me," she'd said back then. And now, years later, she was one of the top attorneys in Austin. I pressed her name. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Arabella?" Her voice was groggy, surprised. "Dana." My voice cracked, but I kept going. "I need help. I don't know who else to call." "Talk to me." That was all she said, and it was enough. I told her everything. From the moment I walked into that ballroom to the second I sat alone in my car, blood on my dress and humiliation in my veins. I didn't hold back this time. No softening, no excuses, just the raw, ugly truth. She didn't interrupt. When I finally stopped, when my throat felt like sandpaper, she said, steady and calm, "You need to come by my office tomorrow morning. We'll fix this. I promise." Something in her tone made me believe her. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. I wasn't done. I opened my landlord's contact. "Russell, retired cop turned private investigator. He'd always been kind in that distant, watchful way. If there was anyone who could help me stay safe, gather what I needed, it was him. I left a voicemail. "Russell, it's Arabella. I need help. Urgent. Please call me when you get this." Within minutes, my phone buzzed. A text. "You're safe. I'll dig." It wasn't much, but it felt like armor. I moved slowly through my apartment, washing the blood from my face, pulling on an old hoodie, wrapping ice in a dish towel for my jaw. It hurt, but the cold steadied me. Then I sat back on my bed, opened my laptop, and attached the photos I'd taken to an email. I typed Dana's address into the recipient line, my fingers hesitating for just a second before I hit send. As the message whooshed away, I realized my heart wasn't racing anymore. My hands weren't trembling. I wasn't numb. I picked up my phone, held it tightly, and whispered to myself, "They don't know what's coming." Morning came too soon. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his hand coming toward me, felt my scalp burning where his fingers yanked my hair. I showered, but it didn't wash off the shame. I dressed in jeans and a loose sweater, the kind of clothes that made me feel small and unnoticeable, and slid on oversized sunglasses to cover the swelling. My lips still ached every time I moved my mouth, but I didn't care. I had somewhere to be. The streets downtown were quiet for a Saturday morning. As I walked toward Catherine's office, my heart pounded harder than it had last night. Anger and fear took turns driving me, like two enemies fighting for control. I'd told her I was ready, but was I? When I reached the glass door of her law firm, my reflection stopped me. A bruised woman, chin slightly raised, daring the world to challenge her again. The receptionist barely glanced at me before pointing me toward a corner office. Catherine stood as I walked in, crossing the room quickly. "Arabella." Her voice was low but steady, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She hugged me carefully, mindful of my injuries, then pulled back to look at me. "Are you ready to burn it all down?" "I already did," I said softly, meeting her gaze. "In my head last night." She gestured for me to sit, and I sank into the leather chair across from her desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, "Tell me everything." And I did. But not just last night. I told her about being 14 and shoved into a wall for talking back, about my mother laughing like it was entertainment. I told her about every holiday where I was the invisible one, every birthday overshadowed by my brother's achievements. How my father always said I was wasting my potential when I pursued art instead of law like him. How my mother would humiliate me in front of family friends, dismissing my work as cute little projects. Catherine didn't write anything down. She just listened, her hands folded, her face unreadable. "This isn't the first time he's hit me," I admitted. The words hung in the room like smoke. But this time, there were 68 people watching, and they did nothing. Her jaw tightened. "That changes everything." She leaned forward, her voice calm but charged with purpose. "We start with documentation, police reports, medical exams. We make this official. Then we send a civil notice. And if they try to bury this, we leak every shred of evidence. Someone in that ballroom filmed it. You know they did. We'll find it." I blinked at her. "Leak it? To who?" "To anyone who matters to them," she replied without hesitation. "The army. Their colleagues. Their country club friends. People who'll care about their spotless image." The words settled over me like armor. She opened a drawer, pulled out a simple white business card, and slid it across the desk. "This is a trauma specialist. You need to start healing while I start destroying." I stared at the card for a moment, running my thumb along its edge. Healing. The word felt foreign. "Arabella," she said softly, "you've been surviving in silence for too long. It's time to live loud." I nodded. My voice was steady when I answered. "Do it. Walking out of that office, the sun hit me like a challenge. The city was louder now, cars honking, people rushing by, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just passing through my own life. They wanted me small. They wanted me silent. If they wanted me silent, they should have left me unbroken. 2 days had passed since I walked out of Catherine's office, and the anger hadn't left. It had settled into something colder, sharper. My face still ached, a dull reminder every time I chewed or smiled. Not that I had much reason to. But the bruises weren't the worst part. It was knowing that every person in that ballroom went home, carried on with their night, while I sat in my apartment trying to remember how to breathe. Rick texted me that morning. "Come by, got something you need to see." I took a long sip of coffee, grabbed my keys, and headed down to his unit. Rick had been my landlord for years, a retired cop turned private investigator who didn't talk much, but always seemed to notice everything. When I knocked, he opened the door almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. "Arabella," he said, stepping aside to let me in. He handed me a steaming mug. "You look like you need this." I sat at his small kitchen table, the kind of place where you could tell 100 stories over cheap coffee. He didn't make small talk, just reached under a stack of papers and slid a thick folder across the table. "You need to see this." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Your family," he said, his voice low. "And not just what happened the other night. This goes deeper." I pulled the folder closer and opened it. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots of email threads. My eyes darted over the pages, trying to make sense of them. Transfers from an account I recognized, my trust fund, to names I didn't know. Large amounts, gone. "Rick," my voice cracked, though I tried to keep it steady. "This is my money." He nodded. "Your father moved funds out months ago, used it to grease the wheels for your brother's promotion. Look at this." He pointed to a printout of an email. "Make sure Caleb shines." His father was very persuasive. The room blurred for a second as I stared at the words, "My own money." Used to celebrate my brother. The same brother who clapped while I was dragged out of that ballroom bleeding. I closed the folder carefully, like if I didn't, I'd rip the pages in half. "So it wasn't earned," I said finally. Rick leaned back in his chair. "Not even close. This wasn't just abuse, Arabella. This is theft and fraud." I thought back to my father's voice at every dinner growing up. "You should be grateful for what we give you, what he gave me." He'd been taking from me my whole life. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the most damning page, the one with the email and the bank transfer side by side. I sent it to Catherine with a single message, "Change of plans. I want it all on record." Her reply came fast. "Then we play dirty." Rick watched me, arms crossed. "What's your next move?" I stared down at the folder, tracing the edge of the paper with my finger. "My next move," I said slowly, "is making sure they regret every choice that brought us here." Later, I took the folder to a coffee shop near downtown. It felt strange to be somewhere so normal, surrounded by people chatting about work and weekend plans, while I held evidence that could destroy my family's carefully polished image. I spread the pages out on the table, scanning them over and over, committing every detail to memory. My brother clapped while I bled. With money that was mine. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment, breathing through the rage that threatened to choke me. They had turned me into an outsider in my own life, and then used my resources to build his. "They think I'll stay quiet," I whispered under my breath. "They really don't know me." When I parked outside my parents' house, the neighborhood felt as artificial as the people waiting inside. Perfectly trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, houses that looked like they'd been printed out of a catalog. My hands stayed on the steering wheel for a long minute. Catherine's voice echoed in my head from our call earlier that morning. If it feels wrong, you leave. Don't give them anything. I finally unclenched my fingers and got out. The autumn air felt heavy, almost damp, as I walked up the stone path I'd walked 1,000 times before. Growing up, I used to imagine I'd run away from this house one day. Now I was walking in by choice, fully aware that they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. My mother opened the door before I even knocked, dressed in one of her pastel cardigans that always made her look so delicate, so harmless. "Arabella," she said in that soft voice she used when she wanted to sound like the victim. "Thank you for coming." "Let's just get to it," I said flatly. She flinched at my tone but stepped aside. The house smelled like lemon polish and whatever fancy candle she'd been burning to mask the stench of tension. My father was already seated in the formal living room, the kind of space we only ever used for holidays and performative moments like this. Caleb was there too, lounging like he owned the place, his phone in hand, smirk already plastered on his face. "Arabella," my father said without looking up, like I was a subordinate called into his office. "Sit." I stayed standing. On the coffee table in front of them sat a neat stack of papers. I didn't have to read them to know what they were. Catherine had warned me they might try this. "We asked you here," my mother began, "because we want to resolve this unpleasantness as a family." Caleb chuckled. "You mean because she's making a big deal out of nothing?" I looked at him, my voice ice. "Still riding high off your fake promotion, Caleb? Must be nice to win awards with someone else's money." His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. My father's hand clenched on the armrest. "Enough," he barked. "We're here to put this behind us." He slid the papers toward me. "This is an agreement. You'll sign it, take a generous payout, and in return, this whole situation disappears. No more drama, no more embarrassing the family." I glanced at the top page. Non-disclosure agreement. Waiver of legal claims. A gag order dressed up as a peace offering. "Generous payout," I repeated, picking up the document. "Funny how you think my silence has a price." "It's a small bruise, Arabella," Caleb said, still lounging, his voice dripping with condescension. "Why blow up the family over that?" I stared at him. "You watched me get dragged out by my hair while you clapped. You think I care about family?" My mother leaned forward, her voice all syrup and poison. "This will protect everyone's reputation, dear, including yours." That's when I saw it. A small voice recorder tucked near the lamp. Subtle, but not enough. They weren't just trying to buy me off. They wanted to twist my words if I lost my temper. I put the papers back down carefully. "You know what's funny? You think I walked in here today as the same Arabella you used to push around. You think I didn't notice the little recorder over there? You think you can throw me pennies from my own stolen trust fund and make me disappear?" My father slammed his hand on the table so hard the coffee cups rattled. "Don't you dare play the victim." I leaned forward until we were eye level. "I'm not playing anything. I came here to give you a chance. This isn't a negotiation. This is your warning." My mother gasped like I'd cursed in church. Caleb laughed nervously, trying to regain ground. "You're bluffing." I picked up my bag and headed for the door. "Keep thinking that." Outside, the night air hit me like a splash of cold water. My hands shook, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. They thought this was about bruises and signatures. They had no idea what was coming. "They wanted me silent," I whispered to myself, pulling out my phone. Instead, I called someone who makes noise for a living. The drive out to the diner felt longer than it was. I rolled the window down just enough to let the night air hit my face, trying to steady my breathing. It wasn't fear this time. It was the clarity that comes when you've hit the point of no return. They thought they could scare me into silence, that a little paper and a payoff would erase everything. They didn't know me at all. The diner was one of those 24-hour places on the edge of town where the coffee is always bitter and the booths have seen better decades. I pulled into the cracked parking lot and spotted Catherine's car. Rick's old truck was parked a few spaces over, the same one he'd driven back when he was still working security for people like my father. Inside, the place was nearly empty. A waitress in a faded uniform nodded as I walked in, but I didn't stop to order. Catherine was in the back booth, her blazer making her look far too polished for this place. Across from her, Rick looked like he belonged here. Broad shoulders, worn leather jacket, and that tired ex-cop posture that said he'd seen too much. "You look like hell," Rick said bluntly as I slid into the booth. "Good to see you too," I replied, my voice flat. Catherine slid a manila folder across the table. "I told you it was bad. I didn't realize how bad until Rick dug this up." I opened the folder and stared at the documents inside. Bank statements, wire transfers, company filings with names I didn't recognize. My trust fund, the one that was supposed to secure my future, had been drained through a series of shell companies. I traced the lines with my finger, my stomach tightening. "They didn't just misuse your money," Catherine said, her voice calm but laced with disgust. "They laundered it, through Caleb. Your brother's promotion? That celebration? It was greased with your money." Rick leaned forward, his arms resting on the table. "Caleb bragged about it at work, said he was making big moves with family money. He acted like it was some brilliant investment. I kept my mouth shut back then. Now, I'm done protecting him." I swallowed hard, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "So they stole from me, beat me, and then celebrated it in front of an audience." Rick gave a short nod. "That's about the size of it." Catherine's expression sharpened. "This isn't just a civil matter anymore, Arabella. This is fraud. Grand larceny, possibly. We can take this to court. We can take it to the press. They won't see it coming." I closed the folder, letting the weight of the papers sit in my hands for a moment. My family had spent years making me believe I was small, powerless, an afterthought. But this was leverage. "They thought I wouldn't notice," I said slowly. "They thought I'd just stay quiet, like always." Catherine leaned back. "So what do you want to do?" "Everything," I said, my voice low but steady. "Civil, criminal, public, but on my terms. No one moves until I say so." Rick glanced at Catherine, then back at me. "There's more. One of the guests at the party recorded your father's little outburst. Full video. Him hitting you, dragging you, Caleb clapping like a fool. I can get it." For the first time in days, I felt the corners of my mouth lift into something like a smile. "Then we're going to give them exactly what they wanted. Attention, but not the kind they can control." We stayed there for another hour, going over options, Catherine outlining timelines and legal strategies, while Rick promised to secure the footage. My coffee grew cold, untouched. But I didn't care. This wasn't about comfort. It was about war. When I finally left, the air outside felt lighter somehow. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past me, my mind sharper than it had been in years. They thought I'd be silent. They forgot who I am. I didn't sleep. Not a wink. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, every piece of evidence spread out like weapons on the battlefield. Bank transfers, party photos, trust documents. The folder Rick had given me sat front and center. I kept replaying the video in my mind. My father's fist connecting with my face, the sound of my mother laughing, Caleb clapping like I deserved it. They wanted me to be humiliated. Instead, they gave me ammunition. By mid-morning, I was parked outside Catherine's office with 2 coffees in a cardboard tray, one for her and one for me. When I walked in, she looked up from her desk and didn't even bother with pleasantries. "Are you sure?" she asked, eyeing the thick folder I'd been clutching like a lifeline. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. Catherine gestured for me to sit. Once we do this, there's no undoing it. You'll be the woman who exposed her family. You need to be ready for that. I sank into the leather chair across from her and placed the folder on her desk. They made me their scapegoat for years. Now they can be the headline. We went through everything again. The video, the transfers, the emails Rick found. Catherine drafted an official statement on my behalf, crisp and calculated, framing the assault as part of a larger pattern of coercion and financial exploitation. This tells your story without making it a pity piece, she explained. It positions you as someone reclaiming power. Good, I said, because I'm done playing victim. By early afternoon, we were sitting at an upscale cafe downtown, the kind of place where people linger over $7 lattes pretending their lives aren't falling apart. I wasn't there to blend in. I was there to meet Jenna Martinez, a journalist I'd known back in college. She'd built a name for herself writing about corruption in local business circles. She owed me. I'd once helped her get out of a sticky situation during an internship, and she hadn't forgotten it. She arrived 10 minutes late, looking frazzled but curious. Arabella, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. You sounded intense on the phone. This will explain why, I said, handing her a flash drive and a few printed documents. There's a video on there. My father, my brother, the whole thing. She raised an eyebrow. And you're okay with me running this? I want you to, I said plainly. But I stay anonymous, for now. She nodded slowly, scanning through a few pages of documents. Her eyes widened. This isn't just family drama. This is fraud and public assault. You know this will blow up. That's the point. Back at Catherine's office, I watched as she hit send on the official statement, forwarding it to Jenna. Then we waited. The article dropped within hours. Prominent local businessman caught on camera, assaulting daughter over family dispute. Financial exploitation alleged. It was brutal and precise, exactly what I needed. Within minutes, my phone lit up with messages from distant relatives, old friends, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were supportive. Others were stunned. Catherine called. They're panicking, she said, her voice tinged with amusement. Your father already called me. Wants to meet. I didn't hesitate. No. You don't even want to hear him out? They wanted silence, I said. They can choke on it now. By the time I left the cafe, social media was ablaze. Clips of my father dragging me out of that ballroom were everywhere. The comments ranged from outrage to disbelief. Who does that to their own daughter? One read. Imagine being Caleb, clapping while your sister bleeds, said another. As I sat in my car, staring at the notifications piling up, a new message buzzed through. An unknown number. You think you've won? You don't know what's coming. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse steady, my fingers tightening around the phone. Whoever sent that wasn't my father, and I already knew this fight was far from over. That text wasn't from my dad. It was from someone worse. I didn't recognize the number, but the words had the same venom my father used when he wanted me to cower. Only this time, they felt colder. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The message was clear. They were regrouping, and I was the enemy now. I barely slept. When I did drift off, my dreams were a jumbled mess of Caleb smirking at the promotion party, my father's fist hitting my face, and my mother's voice. Not laughing this time, but whispering in my ear, "You should have stayed quiet." When I woke up, I realized it wasn't a dream. She'd actually said that to me once, years ago, after I told a teacher my dad had shoved me. By morning, my phone was buzzing again. I blinked at the screen, heart pounding. There were dozens of messages, some from people I knew, some from strangers who'd seen the article. "Stay strong, Arabella," one read. Another said, You're brave for speaking up. But then I saw the others. Liar. Gold digger. Daddy's girl gone crazy. They'd released something. I threw off my blanket and grabbed my laptop, logging into every platform I could. And there it was, a heavily edited clip of the party. In this version, my father was calm, composed, even pleading with me. And me? They'd cut together fragments of me yelling after the assault, making it look like I was unstable, like I'd caused it. The comments were already brutal. I felt my stomach drop. They weren't just fighting back, they were rewriting reality. Catherine's name lit up my phone. "I was about to call you," she said when I answered. Her tone was clipped, all business. "They filed a defamation suit and an injunction. They're trying to shut you up." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course they are." "They hired Marcus Layton," she added, and I froze. Marcus Layton. He was the guy companies brought in when they wanted to bury scandals. "Arabella, this is serious. They're coming hard." "I'm not scared of him," I said, though my voice betrayed me. There was a pause on the other end. "Good. Because you can't be." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another call. My mother. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Arabella," she said, and just from her tone, I knew this wasn't a call to make peace. "Mom." My voice was flat. "You've gone too far," she hissed. "You've embarrassed us beyond repair. Your father hasn't left his study. Caleb can't even go into work. You should have stayed silent." I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing myself not to scream. "You watched him hit me. You laughed, and you're angry at me for telling the truth?" She exhaled sharply. "You think this is about truth? You don't survive in this family by being righteous. You survive by knowing when to shut up." I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to let her hear me cry. "Then I guess I'm done surviving." I hung up before she could say another word. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my reflection in the microwave door. My hair was a mess. My face still had faint bruises. But my eyes, they didn't look like the girl who begged for scraps of approval anymore. They looked like someone ready for war. I drove straight to Catherine's office, not bothering with makeup or even brushing my hair. She opened the door before I knocked. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," I admitted, dropping into the chair across from her. "What's our move?" She slid a folder toward me. "First, we counter their injunction. Second, we widen the scope. If they want a public fight, we bring the fraud into this. The trust fund. The bribes. Everything." "And the video?" I asked. "We're working on getting the full, unedited footage out," she said. "Rick's contact is close. Once it's public, their edited version will look like what it is, a pathetic attempt to spin the truth." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. My mother's words echoed in my ears. "You won't survive this." Catherine leaned forward. "Arabella, look at me." I did. "You didn't come this far to let them bury you. They're lashing out because they're cornered. And scared. That's all this is." I wanted to believe her. I really did. By the time I left her office, the sun was setting. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the city lights flicker on, one by one. My phone was still buzzing with notifications, but I didn't look at them. I already knew what I had to do. I scrolled to a number I hadn't called in years, one that Catherine didn't even know about, and hit dial. When the line picked up, I didn't bother with pleasantries. "It's time," I said. "Release everything." I didn't just plan revenge. I planned their collapse. Walking up the courthouse steps, I felt the weight of every whisper, every camera flash, every curious stare. They weren't looking at me like the black sheep anymore. They were looking at me like someone about to change the story. Catherine walked beside me, calm and composed as always, while Rick followed a step behind, carrying the evidence that had taken weeks to compile. Inside, the air was cold. tense. My father was already there, sitting stiffly at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Caleb sat beside him, his face pale, his bravado from the promotion party gone. My mother, she didn't even look up when I walked in. I saw her profile, perfectly still, lips pressed so tight they were nearly white. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Catherine leaned over. "Remember," she whispered, "they're already on the defensive." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The attorney my father hired stood, projecting confidence, his voice booming. "Your Honor, my clients have been defamed. Their reputations, painstakingly built over decades, have been dragged through the mud by baseless accusations and a misleading video." I kept my face still, but inside I felt my pulse pounding. Misleading? He was really going to call my bruises, my torn hair, and the witnesses misleading? Then Catherine stood. "Your Honor," she said, voice like steel, "we not only reject their claims, but we present evidence that my client was the victim of physical assault, financial exploitation, and defamation, all orchestrated by the very people filing this lawsuit." She motioned to Rick, who carried a thick binder forward. The judge gestured for her to continue. Catherine flipped open the binder and began laying it out. Bank statements, emails, wire transfers. "This is a paper trail proving that Mr. Hargrove, using his authority over Arabella Hargrove's trust, siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars into accounts tied to shell corporations. Those corporations then funded his son Caleb's career advancement. This was her money, stolen, laundered, and used to bankroll the very event where she was assaulted." Gasps rippled through the room. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. My father didn't flinch, but I saw his jaw tighten. The judge's brow furrowed. "Are you prepared to substantiate these claims?" Catherine nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We have corroborating testimony from financial investigators, as well as documentation from the companies involved." My father's lawyer sputtered. "This is irrelevant to the defamation suit." "No," the judge interrupted. "It's highly relevant. If these records are accurate, this court needs to consider whether the plaintiffs themselves engaged in criminal conduct." "I am unsealing these records for review." That was when it happened, the sound I'd been waiting for. Murmurs, gasps, even a few outright whispers from the gallery. Reporters scribbling furiously. And my father, for the first time in my life, looked like a man losing control. The session recessed for lunch. I stepped outside into the bright sun, cameras already waiting. Catherine had prepared me for this moment. She gave me a small nod. Now. I walked to the microphones. My voice didn't shake. For years, I let them define me as the problem child, the ungrateful one, the failure. But today, I reclaim my name. This is not just about what happened to me at a party. This is about years of abuse, financial theft, and coercion. I won't be silent. And I won't be intimidated. Behind me, Catherine handed the journalist we'd been working with a flash drive, the full, unedited video of the party. Within an hour, it was live. The internet lit up. The clip showed everything. My father's hand across my face, the way he yanked me by the hair, Caleb clapping like a spectator at a game. No clever edits, just the ugly truth. By the end of the day, my father's company had lost 2 major contracts. Caleb issued a statement resigning from his position, citing personal reasons. My mother still wouldn't look at me. Later, in Catherine's office, she asked quietly, "Do you feel satisfied?" I thought about it for a long moment. "It's not satisfaction," I said. "It's freedom." Before leaving, I opened my purse and pulled out the necklace my mother had ripped from my neck at the promotion party. I fastened it back where it belonged. "This time," I whispered, "it stays." As I walked out into the cool evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. Some doors, once slammed, should stay closed.